Bill that has been introduced several times. Certainly, if it passes and gets to my desk, I will sign it.
Governor Hobbs acknowledging the political reality at the state capitol. Over the past decade, there have been several efforts to make Indigenous Peoples Day an official state holiday, but those efforts have gone nowhere.
Happy Indigenous Peoples Day, everyone.
The governor of the Gila River Indian community also supports the movement, but Republicans who control the legislature have shown little interest in making Indigenous Peoples Day an official state holiday. There were just 2 legislative proposals introduced by Native American lawmakers this year. Neither even received a committee hearing.
We're definitely, I think, want to change that. Of course, at least for the Gila River Indian community, we do not recognize Columbus Day. We recognize our Akimar Atam Gila River Day instead.
Despite being home to 22 federally recognized tribes, Arizona is one of 17 states that do not officially recognize the Native American holiday. However, supporters have made progress in cities like Tempe and Phoenix. Each now recognizes the holiday and closed their administrative offices today in observance.
I want to thank Phoenix Mayor Kate Gallego for her and for the council for changing that to Indigenous Peoples Day. In fact, there's going to be a large Indigenous Peoples Day celebration today that the community is one of the supporters and sponsors of.
Statewide, the biggest win for supporters of Indigenous Peoples Day came back in 2020 when then-Governor Doug Ducey signed a proclamation officially recognizing the day, but not as a state holiday. That would have to pass through the legislature. Majority Republicans in both the Senate and House were unavailable for comment.
And even though there is a push across the country to get rid of Columbus Day, there are still people who want to celebrate it. Today, Congressman Andy Biggs made sure to post Happy Columbus Day on his social media. In the newsroom, Dennis Welch, Arizona's Family.